The small cafe sat quietly on the corner of a busy street. It was the kind of place where people came to escape the rush of the city, where the smell of coffee mingled with the soft warmth of baked bread. The tables were simple wood, a few chairs were slightly wobbly, and the walls had pictures of landscapes that seemed to promise peace. The sunlight poured through the large windows, catching the dust in the air and turning it into tiny golden specks that floated lazily. In this calm atmosphere, the waitress moved with practiced grace, carrying plates and drinks without spilling a drop. She had been working there for years. Every morning she arrived early, setting tables, checking the coffee machines, and making sure everything was ready before the first customer walked in. She was known for her cheerful smile and friendly nature, greeting regulars by name and remembering their favorite orders. To the outside world, she seemed like any other waitress, polite and hardworking. But underneath that simple exterior was a quiet passion that few knew about. She had once studied piano, spending hours with her fingers moving over the keys, learning melodies that made her heart sing. Life had a way of putting dreams on hold, and responsibilities had pulled her away from music. Now her piano sat in the corner of the cafe, mostly ignored, covered with a light layer of dust, waiting for a moment that might never come. The cafe was busy that morning. A steady stream of people came in, talking softly, working on laptops, or reading newspapers. There was a small group of friends laughing over coffee, an older man quietly reading a book, and a couple sharing a pastry while holding hands. She moved among them, taking orders, refilling cups, and cleaning tables with a rhythm that made the cafe feel alive. Her movements were smooth and careful, as if she had done this 1,000 times, which, in a way, she had. Yet, even in her routine, there was a sense of longing in her eyes, a hint of a story untold. The door opened, letting in a rush of colder air and a man who seemed different from the usual customers. He was well-dressed, with a calm confidence that immediately drew attention. He walked slowly, scanning the room with a quiet curiosity. He seemed to notice everything, the placement of the tables, the way the light hit the floor, the small details that most people overlooked. But then his eyes settled on her, and a faint smile appeared. She felt it, even without looking directly at him, a presence that was both encouraging and strangely familiar. He ordered a simple coffee and found a seat by the window. He did not seem like someone in a hurry. He looked around the cafe with a relaxed gaze, occasionally jotting something in a small notebook. The waitress approached with his cup, her usual polite smile on her face. There was something in his eyes that made her pause for a moment, a curiosity that was not intrusive but genuine. She handed him the coffee, and for a brief second, their eyes met. In that fleeting glance, she sensed a quiet understanding, as if he could see beyond the surface, beyond the uniform and the routine, into something deeper. As she moved back to her work, she hummed softly under her breath, a tune she had not played in years. The notes were light and airy, almost invisible, but the man heard it. He looked up, a slight lift of his eyebrows, a silent question in his gaze. She felt a flicker of embarrassment, but also a strange warmth. Nobody usually noticed these small things about her, the melodies that stayed with her, the music she kept hidden. Throughout the morning, he remained in his seat, sipping coffee slowly, watching the world go by. Occasionally, he glanced at her, not in a way that was intrusive, but with interest. She began to feel a mix of curiosity and nervousness. Who was he? Why did he seem to notice her in a way that no one else did? There was a tension in the air, subtle but palpable, as if something important was about to happen. She pushed the thought away and focused on her work, taking orders, refilling drinks, and making sure every customer felt welcome. The cafe had a small piano in the corner, mostly ignored. It was old but well cared for, with polished keys that still held a beautiful sound. She had once dreamed of playing there, of letting her music fill the space, of sharing a piece of herself with the world. But life had a way of silencing those dreams, of making practicality more important than passion. She glanced at the piano for a brief moment, feeling a familiar ache in her chest. The man at the window seemed to notice her glance, though she did not look directly at him. There was a faint smile on his lips, a silent encouragement, as if he somehow understood the unspoken wish that lingered in her heart. The morning continued with the usual rhythm, the clatter of cups, the low hum of conversation, the occasional laugh. But beneath it all, there was a quiet anticipation, a sense that something was about to break the routine. The waitress went about her tasks, moving between tables, but her mind wandered to the piano, to the music she had put aside, to the melodies that once made her feel alive. The man continued to watch, calm and patient, his presence somehow comforting. By midday, the cafe was busier. A few more customers had arrived, and the small space was filled with chatter and the scent of fresh pastries. The waitress was tired but kept moving with grace, serving each person with attention and care. She found herself stealing glances at the piano, her fingers itching to touch the keys, to bring the music back to life. The man at the window caught her look again and nodded ever so slightly, a silent gesture that felt like permission, like an invitation. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the nervousness. It had been years since she had played in public, and the thought of it now made her heart race. But there was something in his gaze, a quiet insistence, a belief in her that she had not felt in a long time. She felt a flicker of courage, small but real, beginning to grow inside her. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself to imagine sitting at the piano, letting her fingers move across the keys, letting the music fill the cafe. The man finally stood, walking slowly toward her. He did not rush, and his expression was calm, friendly. He spoke softly, asking her if she still played the piano. Her heart skipped a beat. She nodded, barely trusting her voice, and admitted that she had not played in years. He smiled, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that seemed to say he understood. He asked if she would play for just a few moments, to bring the cafe to life with her music. Her hands trembled slightly at the suggestion, but she felt a spark of something she had almost forgotten. The other customers were unaware of the quiet moment unfolding. She moved toward the piano, her steps slow, each one heavy with nerves and anticipation. The man stepped back, giving her space, his eyes encouraging. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath them. It had been so long, but the memory of the music was still there, deep inside her, waiting to be released. She took a deep breath, and as her fingers pressed the first key, a soft, tentative note filled the cafe. It was shaky, uncertain, but it was real. The sound was pure, delicate, and it caught the attention of the man, who watched with a quiet smile. The moment was fragile, like a small candle flickering in the dark, but it held promise, the promise of something beautiful about to unfold. She sat at the piano, her fingers hovering nervously over the keys. The cafe felt suddenly larger, the hum of conversation fading into the background. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she could feel the warmth of her palms as they hovered above the familiar black and white. It had been so long since she had played, and the memories of those hours spent practicing, learning melodies, and losing herself in music came flooding back. Her breath hitched slightly, and she hesitated, unsure if she could bring the music back to life in front of strangers. The man who had asked her to play sat quietly a few feet away, giving her space but keeping his eyes gently on her. There was no pressure in his gaze, only a calm encouragement that made her feel safe enough to consider it. She had never played for anyone outside of her family or teachers, and the thought of being watched made her stomach twist with nerves. Yet, there was something in his presence, something that made her want to try, if only to see if the music still lived inside her. She took a deep breath and let her fingers fall onto the keys. The first note was soft, uncertain, barely audible above the clatter of cups and muted conversation. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself remember the feeling of the piano under her hands, the way the notes could rise and fall, like breathing. The second note was more confident, a small but deliberate step toward reclaiming the music she had left behind. The man nodded subtly, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if he could hear the music inside her before it even began to sound. The melody slowly started to grow, tentative at first, then smoother, richer. Her hands moved almost instinctively, guided by memory and emotion rather than thought. The cafe seemed to hold its breath as the music began to fill the space. Patrons glanced over, some pausing in their conversation, others stopping mid-bite, drawn by the unexpected sound. There was a purity to it, a honesty that could not be faked, and it carried with it the story of a woman who had once loved something so deeply that it had become part of her soul. The waitress felt a surge of emotion as she continued to play. Her fingers danced over the keys, remembering the hours she had spent alone, practicing, learning, and dreaming. She realized that the music had never left her. It had simply been waiting for a moment like this. Each note was a release, a confession, and a reminder that the passion she thought she had lost was still alive. The man watched with quiet admiration, recognizing the vulnerability and courage it took to share this part of herself. A few of the cafe's regular customers began to notice the change. They looked around, curious about the music that had suddenly filled the air. A mother gently hushed her child. A man put down his newspaper, and a couple smiled at each other, caught up in the unexpected beauty of the moment. It was as if the music had cast a spell, drawing everyone's attention without demanding it. The waitress felt her nerves begin to melt away, replaced by a growing confidence that came from simply letting the music flow. She remembered the lessons she had taken as a child, the encouragement of her teachers, the pride she felt when she mastered a particularly difficult piece. She thought of her family, who had always supported her in small ways, even when life made it impossible to continue her studies. Those memories blended with the present, creating a feeling of connection that made her fingers move faster, more confidently. The notes became stronger, more expressive, and the cafe was transformed into a space where time seemed to slow, where the ordinary became extraordinary through the simple act of sharing music. The man approached the piano carefully, not to intrude, but to offer a gentle nod of encouragement. He whispered a few words, telling her she had a gift, that people noticed, and that she should not hide it. His voice was calm, steady, and filled with a sincerity that made her heart swell. She realized that he believed in her, believed in the talent she had almost forgotten, and that belief gave her courage. It was a rare feeling, to be seen and understood in such a deep, unspoken way. The music shifted, moving from soft and tentative to bold and expressive. She allowed herself to feel every note, every chord, pouring her emotions into the melody. There was joy, there was longing, there was a quiet strength that had been buried under years of routine and responsibility. The cafe was silent now, not because people were instructed to be quiet, but because they were captivated, drawn into the story she was telling through the piano. Even those who had never been interested in music found themselves listening, feeling the emotions that flowed from her hands. She realized that playing this music was not just about showing her skill, but about expressing a part of herself that had been waiting for release. It was a gift she could share with others, a way to connect, to touch lives without words. She glanced at the man again, and he nodded as if to say, "This is exactly what we needed to hear." That small gesture gave her an even greater sense of purpose. She was not performing for fame or recognition. She was playing because it was a part of her, and in that moment that was enough. The notes began to flow more freely now, the music rising and falling like a gentle wave. Patrons leaned forward, entranced, some with wide eyes, others with quiet smiles. A few whispered to each other, commenting on how beautiful it was, how unexpected, how powerful. The atmosphere in the cafe had shifted completely. What had been a normal morning, filled with routine and casual conversation, was now a moment of shared experience, a memory that would stay with everyone present for a long time. Her confidence grew with every passing minute. She experimented with the tempo, allowed small improvisations, and let her emotions guide the melody. She was no longer nervous, no longer doubting herself. The music was taking over, and she was surrendering to it fully. The man's presence, calm and supportive, continued to provide a quiet anchor, reminding her that she was not alone. She was sharing something intimate, vulnerable, and yet, in doing so, she felt a profound sense of freedom. The performance went on, long enough to captivate the audience, but not so long that it became tiring. She finished with a gentle flourish, letting the final note linger in the air. For a moment, there was silence, as if everyone needed to let the beauty of what they had just heard sink in. Then, slowly, the cafe erupted into soft applause. Some clapped gently, some clapped enthusiastically, and a few even stood to show their appreciation. The waitress felt a rush of emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and gratitude. She had done it. She had shared her music, her passion, her hidden self, with the world, and it had been received with warmth and admiration. The man approached her again, smiling genuinely. He told her that she had a rare talent, that people were moved by her music, and that she should never stop playing. He did not offer criticism or advice, only encouragement and belief. She felt a deep connection with him, a sense that this encounter was more than chance. It was a moment that could change her life, a reminder that sometimes, taking a risk, stepping out of the shadows, could lead to something extraordinary. She thanked him quietly, feeling both shy and proud. The cafe slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but the energy had shifted. Patrons were smiling, talking in hushed tones about the beautiful music they had heard, and the atmosphere was lighter, warmer, more alive. She returned to her work, taking orders and serving coffee, but there was a new spring in her step, a confidence that had been missing before. She had rediscovered a part of herself, and the knowledge that it could touch others gave her a sense of purpose and joy she had not felt in years. For the rest of the day, she kept glancing at the piano, feeling a quiet anticipation, a sense that this was only the beginning. The man stayed for a while, drinking his coffee, making notes in his notebook, and occasionally glancing at her with approval. When he finally left, he did so with a polite wave and a reassuring smile, leaving behind a spark of encouragement that lingered in the air. She realized that this simple encounter, this brief moment of recognition and support, had awakened something within her. She was ready to embrace her music again, to share it more freely, and to see where it might take her. That afternoon, as the cafe continued its usual rhythm, she allowed herself to dream again. She thought of opportunities of playing for others, of expressing herself fully, and of the possibility that her music could make a difference. The memory of the man's encouragement stayed with her, a quiet reminder that sometimes, all it takes is one person to see your potential, to give you the courage to step forward, and to remind you of the gifts you almost forgot you had. She smiled to herself, feeling a sense of hope and determination, knowing that her life was about to change, one note at a time. The piano notes filled the cafe, spreading warmth and a sense of calm through the small space. People who had been quietly talking or working at their tables stopped what they were doing. Conversations faded into whispers, and even the sound of cups being set on plates seemed to vanish. The waitress's fingers moved with growing confidence, her initial nervousness replaced by a flow of pure emotion. Each chord she played seemed to tell a story of longing, hope, and hidden talent finally set free. She could feel the music moving through her, a living thing that connected her to everyone present in ways she had never imagined. The man who had encouraged her to play sat back, watching quietly, his eyes filled with admiration. He could see her transformation, the way she had started shyly, uncertain of her own ability, and now moved with a grace that came from memory, passion, and courage. He did not interrupt, did not guide, only observed, letting her own instincts lead the music. There was a quiet pride in him, a recognition that sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen when someone is given the right spark of encouragement at the right time. Around the cafe, people began to notice. A young woman paused mid-sip of her coffee, eyes widening as she listened. An older man put down his book, leaning forward slightly in his chair, caught by the beauty of the sound. The mother with the small child gently hushed her baby, and the child looked around curiously, listening to the melody with wide-eyed wonder. The energy in the cafe shifted subtly, from ordinary morning routine to a shared experience, something almost magical that made everyone present feel connected, even strangers. The music had taken hold, and there was a sense that nothing else mattered in that moment but the sound of the piano. The waitress closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the music more deeply. She remembered her childhood lessons, the hours she spent alone practicing, the pride she had felt when mastering a new piece, and the frustration when she could not play something perfectly. Those memories blended with the present, allowing her fingers to move with confidence and creativity. The melody began to rise and fall, soft and gentle in some moments, bold and sweeping in others, as if it were breathing along with her. Each note carried emotion, each pause gave space for feeling, and the room seemed to respond in kind. The man leaned slightly forward, his expression calm but intense. He noticed the subtle changes in her playing, the way her confidence grew with each chord, the way she allowed herself to improvise without fear. He had seen many people in his life, many talented individuals, but there was something rare about her. It was not just her skill, though that was impressive, but the honesty, the vulnerability, and the courage that shone through her performance. She was sharing a piece of herself, and that made the music unforgettable. As the melody continued, the patrons reacted in different ways. Some whispered to each other in admiration, expressing surprise that someone working in a cafe could play so beautifully. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, feeling a calmness or stirring of emotion that caught them off guard. A few were even moved to tears, overcome by the sheer beauty of the music. The atmosphere in the cafe was no longer ordinary. It was alive with emotion, and the music seemed to touch everyone in a personal way, as if it was telling a story unique to each listener. The waitress felt a surge of joy and freedom. She had not realized how much she had missed playing in front of people. The piano, once silent for so long, had become her voice again. She let her hands move more freely, allowing the music to express thoughts and feelings she could not put into words. She played with a rhythm and intensity that surprised even herself. Every note was intentional, yet flowing naturally, as if the piano and her emotions were speaking as one. The cafe had become a stage, but it felt intimate, and she knew the music was reaching into the hearts of those around her. She looked up briefly and caught the eye of the man who had encouraged her. He gave a small nod and a smile, a gesture of approval and encouragement. That tiny acknowledgement strengthened her resolve. She realized she was no longer playing just to please herself, but to share something meaningful with everyone in the room. Her performance was no longer a personal act of courage alone. It had become a gift to those who had paused their routines to listen. It was a reminder that beauty can appear in unexpected places, and talent can be found in the most ordinary lives. The melody began to shift subtly, moving from playful and light to deep and emotional. Her fingers danced across the keys, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, keeping the audience captivated with every change. The notes swelled, rising to fill every corner of the cafe, wrapping around the tables, the chairs, the walls, even the windows. The patrons leaned in unconsciously, drawn closer to the music, and the soft silence of attention made every chord seem even more powerful. She felt a connection to each listener, a shared experience that needed no words. The piano had become a bridge between herself and the people around her. The man finally spoke, though softly, so that only she could hear, saying a few words of encouragement. He reminded her that she had a gift, that people were listening, and that she should play from her heart. His presence was steady, comforting, and gave her the confidence to keep going. She felt no pressure, only trust, and that trust allowed her to explore her abilities fully. She realized that this was what she had missed the most. Not just the music itself, but the joy of connecting with others through it. Around her, the cafe continued to respond. A few people whispered among themselves, trying to describe the beauty of what they were hearing. Some had stopped checking their phones or working, entirely absorbed in the sound. Others exchanged glances, smiling at the shared experience of being unexpectedly moved. Even the staff behind the counter paused, listening to the music, caught in its spell. The entire space had transformed, and the waitress felt a thrill of pride mixed with a gentle humility. She was sharing something powerful, something that went beyond herself, and it was being received with gratitude and wonder. The music reached a crescendo, a high point that seemed to suspend time. Her fingers moved with precision and passion, each note a declaration of her talent and her emotions. She could feel the intensity of the moment in her chest, a thrilling combination of joy, nervousness, and exhilaration. The audience was silent, collectively holding their breath as the music reached its peak. For a brief moment, nothing else mattered except the sound of the piano and the story it told. It was a shared moment of pure humanity, created in a small cafe on an ordinary day, yet extraordinary in its effect. As she played the final notes, she allowed them to linger, stretching the sound until it hung in the air like a delicate perfume. The room remained quiet for a heartbeat longer, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, people began to clap. First softly, then louder, until the applause filled the cafe. The waitress felt her heart swell with a mixture of relief, pride, and happiness. She had taken a risk, shared her talent, and it had been met with awe and appreciation. It was a moment that she would carry with her forever. The man approached once more, smiling warmly. He spoke words of praise and encouragement, reminding her that she had a rare and beautiful gift. He told her that people had noticed, that her music had moved them, and that she should never doubt her talent. She felt a deep gratitude for his support, realizing that his encouragement had been the spark that allowed her to take this step. It was more than just a compliment. It was a recognition of her courage, her skill, and her passion. She felt seen in a way she had not felt in years. The cafe gradually returned to its usual rhythm, but the energy remained changed. Patrons who had been present continued to talk softly about the music they had heard, some still shaking their heads in disbelief at the talent displayed by someone they had only known as a waitress. The warmth in the room had increased, and a sense of shared experience lingered in the air. The waitress returned to her work, but there was a lightness in her step, a renewed confidence and sense of purpose. She knew that this day, this moment, had shifted something within her, and perhaps within everyone who had witnessed it. Even after the man left the cafe, his presence remained in her mind. His quiet encouragement, his belief in her, had reminded her of the power of recognition and support. She realized that the piano, which had sat silent for so long, was no longer just an instrument. It was a voice, a way to connect, to express, and to inspire. The joy she felt from sharing her music was something she wanted to embrace more fully, to make a part of her life again. It was a reminder that hidden talents and passions could still shine, even in unexpected circumstances. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow across the cafe, she allowed herself a small smile. She knew that her life had been touched in a new way, that the music she had almost forgotten had returned, and that she had shared a moment that mattered. The piano would no longer remain silent, and she would carry the memory of this day with her as she continued forward. She had rediscovered not just her music, but a deeper understanding of herself, the courage to take risks, and the joy of touching others in a simple yet profound way. The cafe had been transformed, and so had she in a single beautiful performance. The music had grown stronger, richer, and more commanding. Every note from the piano filled the cafe with an energy that could not be ignored. People who had been casually listening before were now completely absorbed. Some leaned forward in their seats. Others stopped moving entirely, eyes wide, faces reflecting amazement and awe. The waitress's hands moved faster, yet with precision, her fingers gliding over the keys as if they were an extension of her very soul. The melody rose and fell with dramatic emotion, each note carrying a story of long-held dreams and suppressed passion. The man who had encouraged her to play watched quietly, knowing that she had reached a level of performance that few could achieve. There was a calm pride in his expression, a recognition that her courage had unlocked something extraordinary. He understood that this was not just about music. It was about her rediscovering a part of herself, reclaiming what she thought had been lost. He did not intervene, only observed, allowing the moment to unfold naturally, letting the music speak for her. Around the cafe, people reacted instinctively. Some gasped aloud, unable to contain the sheer beauty and skill of the performance. An older woman put her hand over her heart, tears forming in her eyes, while a young man whispered to his friend, his voice trembling with excitement. Even the regulars who had known the waitress for years seemed to see her differently, recognizing a talent they had never known existed. The energy in the room shifted. The ordinary surroundings transformed into a space of wonder and connection. The waitress herself felt the power of the moment. Every note she played seemed to echo not just through the cafe, but inside her. Her heart raced, and her breathing matched the rhythm of the music. She felt alive in a way she had almost forgotten, a rush of emotion that was thrilling and humbling all at once. The piano no longer felt like an instrument. It felt like a vessel, a way to pour out her emotions, her fears, her hopes, and her joy. Each chord was an expression of her inner world, laid bare for anyone willing to listen. The patrons were mesmerized. A mother whispered to her child, encouraging the little one to listen carefully, to feel the music. Some people closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, forgetting their surroundings. Others stared, unable to comprehend how someone they had only known as a waitress could create such a powerful, moving performance. Every note seemed to reach into their hearts, stirring emotions that were both personal and universal. The cafe, once filled with ordinary chatter and background noise, was now united in a shared experience of awe and wonder. The man who had prompted this moment remained a silent anchor. He understood the depth of her talent, and he could see how fully she had embraced it. He knew that the courage to perform was just the first step. The authenticity, the willingness to pour her soul into the music, was what made the performance unforgettable. He felt a quiet satisfaction in witnessing her transformation, a sense that he had been part of something extraordinary without taking credit for it. It was a moment that belonged entirely to her. Her fingers moved with confidence now, no longer hesitant or unsure. The music became more intricate, each note deliberate yet flowing seamlessly into the next. She experimented with small variations, improvising in a way that showed both technical skill and deep emotional understanding. The patrons remained silent, listening intently, caught in the spell of her playing. The energy in the room was electric, charged with admiration and astonishment. People who had never expected to be moved by a piano performance in a cafe were now completely captivated. The crescendo approached. The melody swelled, rising higher and higher, filling the room with an almost overwhelming beauty. The waitress felt a surge of exhilaration, her body moving with the rhythm, her mind focused entirely on the music. She could hear the collective intake of breath from the audience, the subtle shifts in their attention, the small gasps that punctuated the rising notes. She played with a mix of power and delicacy, knowing when to push forward and when to let the sound linger, creating moments of tension and release that left listeners on the edge of their seats. The gasps grew louder as the music reached its peak. Patrons exchanged astonished looks, whispering quietly about what they were hearing. Some clapped their hands to their mouths in disbelief, unable to contain their wonder. The atmosphere was charged, almost electric, as if the cafe itself were alive with the energy of her performance. Every note she played seemed to resonate with the hearts of everyone present, stirring emotions they did not know they carried. The moment was both intimate and expansive, personal and shared, a rare and magical connection between performer and audience. The waitress felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the intensity of what she was experiencing. The music had become a language of its own, a way to communicate feelings too complex for words. She was no longer just playing. She was speaking, expressing, and connecting in ways she had longed to do for years. The man watched her, seeing the transformation in her face, the glow of emotion, the confidence that radiated with every note. He knew this was a turning point, a moment that would stay with her forever. The final notes approached, softer now, more reflective. She allowed them to linger, letting the echoes hang in the air like a delicate mist. The patrons remained still, caught in the afterglow of the performance, savoring the last vibrations of the piano. There was a collective exhale, a release of tension and emotion, as everyone realized that they had witnessed something remarkable. The silence that followed was respectful and profound, a tribute to the power of the music and the courage of the woman who had created it. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, hesitant, almost shy, and then growing louder, filling the cafe with a wave of appreciation. People stood, clapped enthusiastically, and cheered softly, as if afraid to break the magic too abruptly. The waitress felt her heart swell, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had taken a risk, shared her talent, and it had been met with genuine admiration and gratitude. The moment was not just a personal triumph. It was a gift to everyone who had been present to witness it. The man approached once more, smiling warmly. He told her that she had a rare and beautiful gift, that her performance had touched everyone, and that she should never doubt her talent. He emphasized that the courage to share her music had created a moment that people would remember, a moment that had transformed an ordinary cafe morning into something extraordinary. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and awe, understanding that his encouragement had been the catalyst for this incredible experience. She returned to her work, but everything had changed. The cafe was alive with conversation about the music, about the unexpected talent of someone they had only known as a waitress. Patrons lingered longer, discussing the performance, praising her skill, and expressing amazement at what they had heard. The atmosphere was lighter, warmer, and more vibrant, filled with the shared memory of a truly remarkable moment. She moved among the tables with a new sense of confidence, a quiet pride that had been absent before. Her life, even in its small details, felt larger, more meaningful. The memory of the gasps, the awe, and the applause stayed with her, reinforcing the idea that her talent had power, that her music could touch others, and that courage could create opportunities in unexpected ways. She realized that the piano, long silent and hidden, was no longer a distant dream but a living part of her life. The encounter with the man, his belief in her, and the response of the patrons had unlocked something that she could not ignore. She knew that this day, this performance, was the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one filled with possibilities and promise. As the cafe returned to its normal rhythm, she allowed herself a quiet moment to reflect. The performance had been more than just notes on a piano. It had been an expression of her soul, a reclaiming of a part of herself that she had almost forgotten. The applause, the gasps, and the admiration were validation. Yes, but the true reward was the joy she felt in playing, in connecting, in expressing herself fully. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to her music that had been dormant for too long. The memory of this transformative moment would remain with her, a constant reminder of the power of courage, encouragement, and talent shared openly. After the music had ended and the applause had settled into murmurs of admiration, the cafe felt transformed. Patrons were still talking softly about what they had just experienced, some smiling, some shaking their heads in disbelief at the talent they had witnessed. The waitress stood beside the piano, her hands still tingling from the energy of her performance, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. She could hardly believe she had just played in front of so many people and had been met with such warmth and appreciation. The man who had encouraged her to play approached carefully. There was no rush, no fanfare, just a calm presence that made her feel comfortable. He praised her again, reminding her that what she had just shared was rare and special. His words were sincere, filled with admiration and encouragement. He told her that her music had touched everyone in the room, that people were still talking about it, and that she should not hide her talent any longer. He spoke gently, with a quiet conviction that made her believe every word. She listened, her mind still racing, absorbing the weight of his praise. It was one thing to know that she could play, to have a private connection with her piano, but it was entirely different to have her talent recognized by others, to see the joy and amazement on people's faces. She felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling of being truly seen and valued. For a moment, the cafe seemed to shrink, focusing entirely on her and the realization that she had shared something meaningful. The man continued, explaining that there were opportunities beyond this cafe for someone with her skill. He spoke of music schools, performances in local venues, and even recordings. He did not push, did not overwhelm her with expectations, but gently suggested that she consider exploring the possibilities her talent could offer. He wanted her to see that this was not just a fleeting moment of recognition, but a chance to take a step forward, to embrace a path she had once dreamed of but thought impossible. She felt a mix of emotions: surprise, excitement, and fear. The idea of stepping into a world of public performances, of leaving the familiarity of her daily life, was both thrilling and daunting. But beneath the fear was a spark of courage, ignited by the experience she had just lived. She realized that she wanted more, that she no longer wanted to hide her music, and that she was ready to take a chance, even if it felt uncertain. Around the cafe, the patrons had begun to return to their routines, but many lingered, offering smiles, kind words, and gentle congratulations. Some expressed how moved they had been. Others complimented the beauty and depth of her playing. The warmth of their reactions was overwhelming in the best way, a reminder that sharing one's gifts could have a profound impact. She felt a deep connection to these people, strangers yet witnesses to something extraordinary, and it filled her with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. The man handed her a card with his contact information, encouraging her to reach out if she wanted to explore the opportunities he mentioned. He reminded her that her talent was rare and that taking small steps could lead to big changes. His encouragement was steady and unwavering, giving her the confidence to imagine possibilities that had once seemed beyond reach. She held the card carefully, feeling the weight of potential in her hands, knowing that this simple gesture could open doors she had never dared to open before. She returned to her work, serving tables and refilling drinks, but the energy in her steps had changed. Every movement carried a new lightness, a sense of purpose, and a quiet pride. Her interactions with patrons were different now. She smiled more confidently, engaged in conversation with a gentle warmth, and carried herself with a subtle but noticeable assurance. The cafe, once a place of routine and familiarity, had become a space where she could be seen, appreciated, and understood for who she truly was. Throughout the afternoon, she caught herself glancing at the piano, imagining future performances, thinking of the melodies she could play, the emotions she could express, and the connections she could make. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge to a future full of possibilities. She felt an excitement that was both humbling and exhilarating, a sense that her life could change in ways she had only dreamed of. The memory of the gasps, the applause, and the man's encouragement stayed with her, fueling a quiet determination to explore what lay ahead. The cafe continued to bustle with activity, but she felt a calm focus, a sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She noticed the small things, the smiles of regular customers, the polite conversations, the gentle hum of the coffee machines. But now, each detail seemed part of a larger, more vibrant world. She realized that sharing her music had not only impacted others, but had also changed her own perspective, making the ordinary feel extraordinary. As the day drew to a close, she finally had a moment to herself. She sat at the piano once more, her fingers lightly brushing the keys, testing the melodies that had come alive that morning. The music flowed effortlessly, each note carrying the joy and hope she felt. She allowed herself to imagine what the future could hold. Performances in small venues, the opportunity to inspire others with her music, and the freedom to express herself fully. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over her own path, a belief that she could pursue her passion while embracing the challenges and opportunities ahead. She thought of the man, his quiet encouragement, and the way he had seen her talent before anyone else did. It was a reminder that sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe in you, to give you the courage to take a step forward, and to open your eyes to possibilities that had seemed impossible. She felt a deep gratitude, not just for his support, but for the experience itself, which had awakened something she had nearly forgotten. It was a turning point, a moment that would shape her life in ways she could not yet fully imagine. The patrons continued to leave the cafe, some stopping to thank her personally, some offering smiles and words of admiration, and others silently carrying the memory of the music with them. Each interaction reminded her that her gift had the power to touch lives, to create moments of joy, and to bring people together. She realized that sharing her music was not just about recognition or success. It was about connection, expression, and the simple human experience of feeling deeply, both as a performer and as a listener. As the evening sun cast a warm glow through the windows, she took a deep breath, feeling a mixture of relief, excitement, and anticipation. Her life had been changed in just a few hours, not by wealth or status, but by courage, talent, and the kindness of someone who saw her potential. She knew that the journey ahead would require effort, practice, and courage, but she was ready. The piano had become a symbol of possibility, a reminder that her dreams were not lost, only waiting for the right moment to be rediscovered. She cleaned up the cafe, finishing her tasks with a lightness she had not felt in years. Every movement felt purposeful, every action infused with the quiet confidence of someone who had taken a bold step and found success in the courage to act. She smiled to herself, thinking of the music she had played, the reactions of the patrons, and the encouragement of the man who had believed in her. The memory of the gasps, the applause, and the emotional response of the audience stayed with her, a lasting reminder of what was possible when talent meets opportunity. As she locked the cafe for the night, she lingered near the piano, resting her hands gently on the keys. She played a few soft notes, feeling the familiar connection, the music flowing effortlessly and naturally. It was a quiet moment, a reflection of the journey she had begun that morning. She felt a sense of peace and excitement, knowing that her life had shifted, that her music could take her to places she had never imagined, and that she was ready to embrace the future with courage and determination. With one last glance at the piano, she turned and left the cafe, her steps light and purposeful. The city outside was quiet as the evening settled in, but inside her heart, there was a melody that would continue to grow, a rhythm that carried the promise of new beginnings, and a sense of hope that had been reignited. She knew that this was only the beginning, that her talent would continue to open doors, create connections, and shape her life in extraordinary ways. The journey ahead was unknown, but she faced it with confidence, joy, and the knowledge that the music within her would always guide the way.